Native American recreational activities, card games, sports, and other inventive entertainment were the mainstays of early Native American leisure activities. The majority of these contests and athletic activities were noted by observers in the early 18th century. The Algonquian, Cherokee, Iroquoian, Sioux, Lakota, Choctaw, and Great Lakes peoples were among the early American tribes whose sports included stickball, an early lacrosse variant known as Little Brother of War, chunky, archery, darts, foot races, and canoeing. Among tribes like the Lakota and Iroquois, card and dice games were popular forms of amusement. Many competitions and games developed by Native American tribes in America have influenced modern sports such as lacrosse and gambling. Several native games were unique to individual tribes. The Iroquoian, for example, frequently played a game called bowl game, which involved using colored balls and sticks. Religious convictions, politics, gambling, conflict resolution, health benefits, land use, and entertainment were among the motivations behind playing games and sports. Delsahut. In 1639, it was noted that certain tribes would heal the ill with a Huron dice game. To ceremoniously bring luck like rain, good harvests, drive away evil spirits, or just bring people together for a common purpose, Native Americans would frequently engage in games. A certain type of game was designed with kids in mind. It taught them discipline, hand-eye coordination, the value of hard work, and respect. Adults only took pleasure in certain activities. Even though stickball was one of the most popular sports played by a variety of tribes that frequently competed against one another to settle disputes that might have otherwise resulted in war, the game's physical nature often caused injuries to its players. Since it is the game from which modern-day lacrosse is derived, stickball, also known as Little Brother of War, is one of the most well-known sports played by early American indigenous tribes. Early stickball games had very loose rules and boundaries, and they were frequently played as part of a war between two villages, with players using sticks with nets at the top to pass balls to teammates. These games, which could last for several days, were played in large open fields located between the two feuding villages. Goals could range from 500 yards to several miles apart, with as many as 100 to 10,000 men participating. In the 1700s, the Choctaw and Cherokee people were known to play the game. Today, the game is played not only by the Cherokee, but also by many other southeastern woodland tribes, including the Muskogee, Seminole, Yuchi, and Natchez, using very similar rules. In the early 18th century, chunky was a known game played by American Indians in the Mississippi Valley, notably the Bayagulas and the Choctaw people. The scholarly essay, Ferocity and Finesse, American Indian Sports in Mississippi, by James F. Barnett, Jr., details how chunky was regarded as a spiritual and political game by the native people. Native American men were the main players of stickball in Mississippi. Women were known to play chunky instead. The goal of the two-person competition was to hurl spear-shaped poles, which were typically 8 to 15 feet long, at rolling hoops. Over time, different iterations of the game were noticed all over the nation. In the 1770s, the Choctaw people were seen playing chunky on a specially marked clay playing field that was at least 200 feet long. Instead of using poles, they used circular stones or discs. Chunky stones were highly valued and passed down from one generation to the next, according to James Adair, an Englishman who lived with the Chickasaws in the mid-1700s. The stones were also carefully stored in secure locations in between games. Archery was among the first games that Native Americans are known to have played. The aim of this game for the Indians was to hit an animal or a target. Indians were known to be playing this game as early as AD 250. The Algonquian and Iroquoian tribes, who lived in the region of modern-day Michigan, made their bows from materials they found nearby. Hardwoods such as hickory, black locust, ash, elm, and ironwood were frequently used in long lengths. Traditionally, bows were made to be longer in order to make them easier to use. Antler, copper, and wood were among the many materials used to make arrowheads. However, stone arrowheads were the most prized. Compared to other materials, they turned out to be significantly stronger and more efficient. In the Great Plains, a game called bows and arrows was more common than archery. In this game, Players would try to shoot their arrow through an arrow that was hidden somewhere in the ground. All the other arrows would belong to the winner of this game. The history of gambling dates back to the early Native American tribes who bet their horses, food, and other personal belongings on games like chunky and stickball. There were bets on the results of many Native American games, such as dice games and archery. Gambling evolved into a way of life for many tribes. In the book Prehistoric Games of North American Indians, Martin Rizzo explains, "From the subarctic to Mesoamerica, gamblers frequently bet their own bodies in order to be bought into slavery. Later, slave owners from various tribes would gamble with their own captives. There were occasions when gamblers in the upper Columbia River region would lose wives and children to slavery as a result of wagers they made on games. Many times, early Native American tribes, betting is cited as justification for why some American Indians bet like their ancestors did in the past. For certain Native American tribes, canoes served as more than just their principal means of transportation. Their use and function were also motivated by their religious convictions. As early as 1603, explorers from North America, such as Samuel de Champlain, noticed these vessels. Native American canoes were strong and handcrafted, with carved tree bark. In the 17th century, Native Americans in the northeastern United States fished from canoes and occasionally shot bows and arrows from them. American tribes frequently held rowing competitions as a form of athletic competition. Animals that were retrieved during hunting were towed by kayaks, which are shorter canoes that are typically 10 to 28 feet long. A very basic guessing game called Pass the Stone is still used to teach kids about Native American culture. Two balls of differing colors are passed back and forth in a circle. Children are asked what color ball they were given while keeping their eyes closed. They stay in the circle if their guess is accurate. They would come out of the circle if their guess was wrong. Some games were not as popular as others. Hand-eye coordination was the focus of the game, Ring the Stick. A stick with a ring tied to the bottom would be used by the participants. The player would attempt to catch the ring on the stick after it was thrown into the air. The butterfly version of hide and seek was a quiet version of the game, singing, "Butterfly, butterfly, show me where to go." The seeker would go in silence in search of the players who were hiding. Two teams, 4 moccasins, and a stone were used in the moccasin game. When the opposing team was not looking, one team would conceal the stone in one of their moccasins. The opposing team would then attempt to locate the moccasin that had the stone. The purpose of the SEP game was to help kids fall asleep. The children would be instructed to be quiet and go to bed until the following day, when the leader said, "SEP," after leading them in a variety of songs. The classification of Native American games into 2 categories, chance and dexterity. Dice games, hand games, and bowl games were the 3 most popular types of chance games. The games of dice were not unlike from those of today. Individuals would roll 2 dice until they came up with a certain amount. Because it could be played by people from different tribes despite language barriers, the hand game gained popularity. While the other person tried to guess which hand the object was in, one person would hold an object and pass it between their hands. There were 6 different colored nuts in the bowl game. One team or individual scored a point if the bowl struck the ground, and 5 of the nuts fell on the same color. Winner was the team with the most points. Depending on how competitive the native people were, these games could go on for a very long time with a little bit of gambling, adroitness. There were a ton of other games that required dexterity. These games included hoop and pole, snow snake, bows and arrows, and several ball and running games. In the winter, snow snake had to be played. Rocks, sticks, and other objects would be gathered by the participants. The object that slid the closest to the target after each participant slid their own object towards it won. 2 players were needed for the hoop and pole game. Everyone would try to hit their pole into the target hoop. Whoever hit the hoops won. They would try again if they both hit it or missed it. Other games were various foot races and early lacrosse. The spears and arrowheads used in archery competitions and other sports were frequently carved by women. In Volume 23 of the Women's History Review, Professor Fabrice Delsahut and Thierry Terre detail how Native American women in North America took part in and contributed to the creation of native games. Since foot races were mainly for men, Indian women would organize their own races in valleys apart from the tribe's main population. Originally created exclusively for females, ball games such as the double ball game were popularized throughout the Southwest in the early 1700s. For the double ball contest, players had to catch two bags made of deerskin that were tied together with a leather strap, with a forked branch or two pieces of wood, passing them from one player to another and moving them towards the opponent's goal. There have been reports of Cochin, Mandan, and Manadari women participating in other sports like wrestling and swimming.